RAPHAEL SANZIO, born in 1483 in Urbino, Italy, stands as one of the central figures of the High Renaissance, alongside masters such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. His works have come to define the Renaissance era's ideals of balance, harmony, and beauty. Unlike his contemporaries, Raphael's contributions extend beyond his innovative compositions and intricate technique. He reshaped the understanding of form, color, and narrative within the Western art tradition. As a prodigy, his rapid rise to prominence and his ability to assimilate and synthesize the styles of other Renaissance masters allowed him to carve a unique path that continues to influence art and culture today. Raphael's significance is not solely rooted in his artistic skill, but also in the philosophical and intellectual undercurrents that shaped his time. The Renaissance, characterized by a renewed interest in classical antiquity, saw artists and thinkers alike strive for humanist ideals. Raphael, ever the adept student, absorbed this ethos and rendered it through his works. He was deeply engaged in conveying the beauty of the human form, the complexity of human emotion, and the profundity of religious themes, blending them seamlessly into a visual language that would define an era. Raphael's ability to harmonize the precision of linear perspective with the delicate handling of color set him apart from his peers. While Leonardo and Michelangelo often explored dramatic chiaroscuro and emotional intensity, Raphael maintained a sense of serene clarity and grace. This balance between intellectual rigor and emotional tranquility is what made Raphael's work so universally appealing, earning him commissions from powerful patrons such as the popes, kings, and wealthy noble families. His popularity transcended geographical boundaries as his style spread throughout Europe, influencing generations of artists in diverse countries. What makes Raphael particularly interesting is his capacity for integration and synthesis. Unlike Leonardo, whose work remained highly individualistic and personal, Raphael worked within a collaborative environment, often assimilating the ideas of others while adding his personal touch. This is evident in his time spent in Florence, where he encountered the works of Michelangelo and Leonardo. Rather than replicating their styles, he distilled their techniques and ideologies into a visual vocabulary that was uniquely his own, combining the fluidity of Leonardo's compositions with the robust physicality of Michelangelo's figures. Through this, Raphael bridged the gap between the intellectual rigor of Florence and the more decorative, courtly style of Urbino. In the realm of religious art, Raphael's innovative approach is most evident. His paintings, particularly his numerous Madonnas, redefined the portrayal of the divine, humanizing religious figures in a way that had never been done before. His Madonna of the Meadow, for instance, portrays the Virgin Mary not as a distant, ethereal figure, but as a woman with human warmth and tenderness, nurturing the Christ child. In these works, Raphael captured a delicate balance between the sacred and the human, bringing a new level of emotional depth to religious iconography. Equally important was Raphael's role in the development of portraiture during the Renaissance. Unlike many of his predecessors who focused primarily on idealized representations, Raphael's portraits presented his subjects with a sense of immediacy and psychological depth. The sitter was not merely an object of admiration, but a person with individuality and character. His portraits of popes, such as Pope Julius II, and aristocrats demonstrate an acute sensitivity to the nuances of personality, often using subtle expressions and gestures to reveal the inner life of his subjects. In addition to portraiture, Raphael's frescoes are perhaps his most lasting legacy. His work in the Vatican, particularly in the Raphael rooms, demonstrates an extraordinary command of narrative and space. The School of Athens, perhaps his most famous fresco, exemplifies Raphael's understanding of perspective and his mastery of figure composition. The fresco brings together the great philosophers of the classical world, including Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, in a grand architectural space that both organizes and elevates the humanistic values of the time. The work exemplifies the Renaissance commitment to the intellectual pursuit of knowledge, while also showcasing Raphael's refined technique and philosophical depth. One of Raphael's most remarkable qualities was his ability to navigate the complex political and social landscapes of his time. He worked under the patronage of Pope Julius II, one of the most powerful and ambitious figures in Renaissance Italy. Julius II's vision for the Vatican included the creation of grandiose works of art, and Raphael, alongside other great artists like Michelangelo, was tasked with realizing this vision. Raphael's capacity to collaborate with such a diverse group of artists, each with their own methods and approaches, speaks to his diplomacy, humility, and his willingness to learn and adapt. Despite his immense success, Raphael's life was tragically short. He died in 1520 at the age of 37, leaving behind a legacy that has only grown in importance over the centuries. His work continues to be celebrated for its elegance, clarity, and balance. The relatively few years he spent working were more than enough to cement his place as one of the greatest artists in history. His death marked the end of the High Renaissance, and the art world soon transitioned into the Mannerist phase, which reacted against the ideals that Raphael embodied. RAPHAEL SANZIO, born on April 6, 1483, in the small town of Urbino in central Italy, was destined for greatness in the world of art. Urbino, at the time, was a significant cultural center, renowned for its vibrant court life, its patronage of the arts, and its intellectual atmosphere. His father, Giovanni Sanni, a painter and court artist for Duke Federico de Montefeltro, played a pivotal role in shaping Raphael's early exposure to the world of art. Giovanni was well respected in the region, and his influence on young Raphael was profound, setting the stage for the early development of his artistic abilities. Raphael's mother, Magia di Battista di Nicola, passed away when he was just 8 years old, leaving his father to raise him. While his mother's early death was a tragic loss, it was Giovanni who ensured that Raphael was introduced to the world of art and the principles of Renaissance painting. Growing up in an artistic environment, Raphael was naturally drawn to the craft. His father's studio provided an ideal setting for him to develop his skills. Giovanni's work was influenced by both Umbrian and early Renaissance traditions, and he passed on his knowledge of tempera painting, which was prevalent in the region at the time. Raphael's earliest paintings were undoubtedly shaped by this training, as well as by the classical ideals of beauty and proportion that were beginning to dominate the Renaissance. It is likely that Raphael's first artistic efforts were small devotional works, which were common for aspiring artists in his position. These early works would have been based on religious subjects, particularly scenes from the lives of saints or the Virgin Mary, themes that would remain central to his output throughout his career. By the time Raphael was in his early teens, his talents were already evident, and his father began to arrange for him to study under the guidance of a more accomplished artist. In 1494, after his father's death, Raphael was sent to Perugia, where he entered the workshop of the renowned painter Pietro Perugino. Perugino was a key figure in the Umbrian school of painting and a celebrated master of the time, known for his use of serene compositions, delicate color schemes, and precise, harmonious forms. Perugino's influence on Raphael would prove to be significant, particularly in terms of his mastery of linear perspective, composition, and his gentle, almost ethereal rendering of figures. Under Perugino's tutelage, Raphael honed his technical skills, learning the fine details of fresco painting, drawing, and the nuanced use of color. Perugino's work, characterized by its grace and clarity, laid the foundation for Raphael's own signature style. It is said that Raphael's early works, such as the Crucifixion and the Marriage of the Virgin, bear a striking resemblance to Perugino's compositions, demonstrating how deeply Raphael absorbed his master's approach. However, even at this early stage in his career, Raphael's unique talent began to shine through. While he learned from Perugino's methodical approach to painting, Raphael's compositions displayed a sense of fluidity and elegance that distinguished his work from that of his mentor. As Raphael's skill developed, his work began to show the influences of other artists, particularly those from the great artistic city of Florence. In 1504, Raphael moved to Florence, where he was exposed to the works of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and other leading artists of the High Renaissance. Florence, at the time, was the epicenter of artistic innovation, and it was here that Raphael's style began to mature and evolve. The city's atmosphere was one of intellectual ferment, with new ideas about perspective, human anatomy, and the portrayal of the human form dominating the artistic discourse. Raphael's encounter with these ideas had a transformative effect on his work, pushing him to experiment with new approaches to space, light, and human expression. One of the most significant influences during Raphael's time in Florence was Leonardo da Vinci. Raphael's exposure to Leonardo's work profoundly shaped his understanding of composition and the dynamic relationship between light and shadow. While Raphael did not adopt Leonardo's dramatic use of chiaroscuro, he was undoubtedly influenced by his careful study of human anatomy and his ability to capture the emotional depth of his subjects. This influence is particularly evident in Raphael's later works, such as the Madonna of the Goldfinch, where the figures are more three-dimensional and the light falls across the forms with a more nuanced delicacy, creating a sense of depth that was not present in his earlier works. Michelangelo, too, had a profound impact on Raphael during his time in Florence. The two artists' styles were quite different. Michelangelo's works were often monumental and intense, while Raphael's were characterized by grace and harmony. Nonetheless, Raphael was captivated by Michelangelo's mastery of the human form and his sculptural approach to painting. The influence of Michelangelo is most clearly seen in Raphael's later frescoes, where the figures are more robust, with a sense of weight and muscularity reminiscent of Michelangelo's sculptures. However, Raphael blended this new influence with his own more classical ideals, creating a synthesis of strength and elegance in his figures that became one of his trademarks. During his years in Florence, Raphael's work also began to reflect a more sophisticated understanding of space. He studied the principles of linear perspective, learning to create depth and dimension on the flat surface of the canvas. His compositions became more complex, with a greater sense of movement and interaction between figures. One of the hallmarks of Raphael's work is his ability to create a harmonious relationship between the figures and the architectural space they inhabit. This is evident in works like the Marriage of the Virgin and the Madonna of the Pinks, where the figures are arranged in such a way that they seem to inhabit the space naturally, as if they are part of a larger, coherent world. Raphael's time in Florence also marked the beginning of his engagement with classical antiquity. The study of ancient Greek and Roman art and architecture was central to the Renaissance, and Raphael embraced these classical ideals, infusing his work with a sense of order, proportion, and beauty derived from the classical past. His use of classical motifs, such as the triangular composition and the idealization of the human form, would become key features of his later work. This interest in classical antiquity was not merely aesthetic, but also philosophical, as Raphael's paintings often sought to convey the ideals of humanism, which emphasized the value of human experience, intellect, and emotion. In the early stages of Raphael's career, the city of Perugia played a crucial role in shaping the artist's path toward greatness. Following the death of his father, Giovanni Santi, in 1494, Raphael was sent to Perugia to continue his artistic education. Perugia, located in the heart of Umbria, was a thriving center of artistic and cultural activity during the late 15th century. It was here that Raphael entered the workshop of Pietro Perugino, a well-established painter who was renowned for his serene, harmonious style and his mastery of fresco painting. The city, along with Perugino's studio, provided Raphael with the ideal environment to refine his artistic skills and begin his transformation into a master in his own right. Perugino was an influential figure in the Umbrian school of painting, and under his tutelage, Raphael absorbed the essential techniques that would later become foundational to his own work. Perugino's style was marked by an emphasis on graceful figures, clear compositions, and a soothing use of color. These characteristics would deeply influence Raphael, who, while learning from Perugino, quickly demonstrated his ability to grasp these techniques and improve upon them. In the early years of his apprenticeship, Raphael worked on smaller devotional works, such as altarpieces and panel paintings, typical of the religious commissions that many young artists undertook. His first known works from this period, such as the Marriage of the Virgin and Saint Nicholas of Tolentino, exhibit a clear reverence for Perugino's style, particularly in their delicate figures, serene expressions, and balanced compositions. Despite the evident influence of his master, Raphael's works already began to show signs of innovation and personal flair. He displayed an innate understanding of the use of space, proportions, and the arrangement of figures, elevating the compositions to a level beyond the academic teaching of his mentor. Raphael was particularly adept at composing large groups of figures in harmonious ways, ensuring that every element within the work interacted naturally. This ability would become one of his trademarks, and it was during his time in Perugia that he first experimented with creating depth and movement within his scenes. His work was a careful study of classical ideals, but with an emerging, subtle sophistication that hinted at the direction in which his style would develop. A significant milestone in Raphael's early years in Perugia was his exposure to the works of the renowned artist Pinturicchio. Pinturicchio, a prominent figure in the Umbrian region, had already achieved recognition for his fresco cycles and was known for his use of vibrant colors and detailed decoration. Pinturicchio's work, while more ornate than that of Perugino, offered Raphael a different approach to fresco painting, one that incorporated a more decorative and intricate style. It is likely that Raphael studied Pinturicchio's use of color and decorative detail while working on commissions that involved collaboration with other artists, including Pinturicchio himself. This interaction broadened Raphael's understanding of the possibilities within fresco work, adding a layer of richness to his visual vocabulary. As Raphael's skill developed, his relationship with Perugino grew more collaborative. By the time Raphael was in his late teens, he began to take on more independent commissions, demonstrating not only technical proficiency, but also a growing sense of artistic vision. One of his earliest independent works, The Annunciation, displayed his understanding of complex compositions and his ability to inject a sense of narrative into his scenes. The work revealed Raphael's careful attention to light, as well as his ability to craft a scene with a harmonious blend of stillness and movement. This work, along with others from the same period, indicated that Raphael was beginning to move beyond the constraints of his teacher's influence, setting the stage for his evolution as a groundbreaking artist. In addition to his formal training under Perugino, Raphael was immersed in the broader intellectual environment of Perugia. The city, with its rich history and vibrant cultural life, fostered an atmosphere in which Raphael was exposed to a range of artistic, philosophical, and literary ideas. As Renaissance humanism took hold across Italy, artists were increasingly drawn to the study of classical antiquity, and the intellectual movement began to permeate the visual arts. Raphael, naturally curious and eager to expand his horizons, absorbed these ideas and incorporated them into his artistic vision. The ideals of balance, proportion, and harmony that defined the classical world became central to his approach to painting, and these principles would be reflected in every work he created. During his time in Perugia, Raphael's exposure to the works of the great Renaissance artists would increase. Though his apprenticeship primarily focused on developing the technical aspects of his craft, he had the opportunity to see the work of masters such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. While Raphael's time in Perugia was not as directly linked to the cultural epicenter of Florence as it would later be, he was nevertheless aware of the ongoing artistic innovations in the major cities of Italy. The presence of these influences began to push Raphael to evolve his own style, which would soon incorporate the dramatic use of light and shadow, the study of anatomy, and the more dynamic compositions that were central to the works of Leonardo and Michelangelo. It was also during his years in Perugia that Raphael's reputation as a skilled artist began to spread beyond the immediate region. His growing fame led to his first major commissions from local churches and noble families. These commissions were vital for Raphael's professional development, as they allowed him to apply the knowledge and skills he had acquired under Perugino's guidance in more ambitious and larger-scale works. The success of these early projects set the stage for the broader recognition that would follow in the coming years. By the time he left Perugia for Florence in 1504, Raphael had already earned a reputation as a promising young artist, capable of handling complex commissions with an impressive degree of technical proficiency. In the years following his time in Perugia, Raphael would continue to build on the foundations laid during his apprenticeship. The period in Perugia was instrumental in shaping his artistic identity, allowing him to refine his technical skills, experiment with composition, and explore new methods of visual storytelling. The lessons he learned from Perugino, combined with his exposure to other Renaissance masters, provided him with the tools necessary to create works of profound beauty and intellectual depth. Perugia, though a smaller city compared to Florence and Rome, played a crucial role in shaping Raphael's early career, and it was here that he began to develop the distinctive style that would make him one of the most revered artists in history. The years spent in Perugia were not just a time of technical development, but also a formative period in Raphael's personal growth as an artist. His time with Perugino helped him understand the importance of discipline, precision, and the mastery of artistic techniques, but it also introduced him to a world of artistic and intellectual curiosity that would remain with him throughout his life. In 1504, Raphael left the familiar surroundings of Perugia for the vibrant city of Florence, the cultural epicenter of the Italian Renaissance. At the time, Florence was home to some of the greatest artistic minds in Europe, and it was here that Raphael would experience a transformative phase in his artistic development. The city was teeming with innovation, with prominent figures such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Sandro Botticelli dominating the artistic scene. Raphael's decision to move to Florence marked a pivotal moment in his career, as he was no longer merely an apprentice learning from a single master, but was now positioned to absorb the collective genius of some of the most important figures in Renaissance art. Florence was a city of immense intellectual and artistic wealth, where the principles of humanism and classical antiquity influenced every aspect of life. The Medici family, who ruled Florence, were enthusiastic patrons of the arts, and their support allowed artists to thrive. The city was also home to the greatest artistic and architectural innovations of the time. For Raphael, the experience of living in Florence was a powerful catalyst for his growth, as he had the opportunity to study and interact with the works of the masters who had already shaped the course of the Renaissance. As soon as he arrived, he was exposed to an unparalleled artistic environment that would stretch his imagination and push him to new creative heights. One of the most significant influences on Raphael during his time in Florence was the work of Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo's pioneering studies of anatomy, his mastery of light and shadow through the technique of chiaroscuro, and his groundbreaking compositions had already set the standard for the Renaissance's pursuit of realism. Raphael, who had already shown considerable promise as a painter, was inspired by Leonardo's innovative approaches to painting and drawing. He studied Leonardo's use of light, particularly his ability to create volume and texture through soft transitions of light and shadow. Though Raphael did not adopt the extreme use of contrast that characterized Leonardo's chiaroscuro, he was deeply influenced by the sense of realism and the psychological depth that Leonardo brought to his subjects. In particular, Raphael was drawn to Leonardo's The Virgin of the Rocks, a masterpiece that exemplified the artist's genius in using light to model the human figure and creating atmospheric space. Raphael's Madonna of the Goldfinch, completed during his time in Florence, shows the influence of Leonardo in its use of soft light and in the tender, intimate portrayal of the Virgin and Child. While Raphael retained his characteristic grace, his figures were now imbued with a greater sense of depth and realism, a direct result of his study of Leonardo's techniques. In addition to Leonardo, Raphael encountered the works of Michelangelo, whose influence was perhaps even more profound. Michelangelo's work, particularly his sculptures, had a powerful impact on Raphael's understanding of the human form. Michelangelo's figures were monumental, filled with muscular tension and dramatic expression, a stark contrast to the graceful, idealized figures of the early Renaissance. While Raphael's own style was more restrained and harmonious than Michelangelo's, he was nonetheless inspired by the sculptural quality of Michelangelo's figures and his bold approach to the human body. This influence is evident in Raphael's later paintings, where his figures take on a more sculptural quality, with stronger anatomical detail and greater muscular definition. One of the most important works in which Raphael clearly adopted Michelangelo's influence was in the Tenda Doni, a round painting commissioned by the wealthy merchant Agnolo Doni. This piece, which depicts the Holy Family, shows a more robust, muscular interpretation of the human body. The figures are more three-dimensional than in Raphael's earlier works, demonstrating a more complex understanding of anatomy and volume. The composition, too, shows a new sense of dynamism, with the figures arranged in a more energetic and varied manner, a departure from the calm, balanced arrangement seen in Raphael's previous work. While Leonardo and Michelangelo were Raphael's most significant influences during his time in Florence, the city also provided him with the opportunity to interact with other notable artists. Among these was the painter Sandro Botticelli, whose works, such as The Birth of Venus and Primavera, demonstrated a profound mastery of line and a delicate, ethereal quality that Raphael would later incorporate into his own style. Botticelli's influence is particularly evident in Raphael's treatment of drapery and the graceful flow of the figure's movements. The sense of elegance that characterized Botticelli's work resonated with Raphael, and he began to incorporate similar flowing lines and graceful poses in his own paintings. During his time in Florence, Raphael also studied the works of the great masters of the past, including the works of classical antiquity, which were being rediscovered during the Renaissance. The humanist ideals of balance, harmony, and idealized beauty were central to the artists of Florence, and Raphael embraced these principles fully. His exposure to classical sculptures, such as the Laocoon and the Apollo Belvedere, would have been pivotal in shaping his understanding of proportion and beauty. These sculptures, which represented the pinnacle of ancient Greek and Roman art, became key sources of inspiration for Raphael's paintings, particularly in his depictions of a human figure. Raphael's time in Florence was also marked by his increasing popularity. The success of his early works, such as the Madonna of the Pinks and the Marriage of the Virgin, earned him commissions from wealthy patrons in Florence and beyond. His ability to seamlessly blend the influences of Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Botticelli with his own emerging style made him a sought-after artist. His graceful compositions and gentle handling of color, combined with his skillful integration of human emotion and narrative, struck a chord with Renaissance audiences who were eager for works that both celebrated the beauty of the human form and conveyed deeper spiritual truths. However, despite the opportunities and the success he found in Florence, Raphael's time in the city was relatively short-lived. In 1508, just 4 years after his arrival, Raphael was invited to Rome by Pope Julius II, who was looking for artists to decorate the Vatican Palace. This invitation marked a major turning point in Raphael's career, as it would bring him into direct contact with some of the most powerful figures in Italy and open the door to a new phase in his artistic journey. Yet, as Raphael prepared to leave Florence, it was clear that his time in the city had been instrumental in shaping his artistic maturity. The lessons he learned in Florence would stay with him throughout his life, as he continued to blend the influences of the Renaissance masters with his own distinctive vision. The period in Florence represented a crucial moment in Raphael's development, one in which he transformed from a skilled apprentice to a confident artist ready to take on the world. By immersing himself in the creative atmosphere of the city and engaging with the works of the great Renaissance masters, Raphael developed a style that was both innovative and rooted in tradition. In 1508, Raphael's career took a monumental turn when Pope Julius II invited him to Rome to work on a series of commissions for the Vatican. This move marked the beginning of a new phase in his artistic journey, one that would elevate him to unprecedented levels of fame and significance in the art world. The invitation came after Raphael had spent a few transformative years in Florence, where his work had caught the attention of the artistic elite. At this time, Julius II, a pope known for his ambitious building projects and deep commitment to the arts, was transforming the Vatican into a center of Renaissance grandeur. He wanted the Vatican to become not only a religious, but also a cultural and intellectual hub. To achieve this, he enlisted the best artists of the era, including Michelangelo, who was already working on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and Raphael, who would be tasked with decorating the rooms of the papal apartments. Raphael's arrival in Rome marked the beginning of a period of extraordinary productivity. Over the next several years, he would create some of his most famous works, many of which are still revered today. The initial commission was for Raphael to work on the Stanze di Raffaello, or Raphael rooms, which were a series of 4 rooms in the Apostolic Palace, intended for the private use of the Pope. These rooms, with their grand scale and intricate architectural details, were a perfect canvas for Raphael's creative genius. The walls would soon be covered in magnificent frescoes, each one more elaborate and sophisticated than the last. Raphael's most important fresco cycle was in the stanza della Segnatura, the first of the rooms to be decorated. The commission was to create paintings that reflected the intellectual and spiritual aspirations of the Renaissance. The room itself was to be a symbol of the unity of knowledge, spiritual, philosophical, and scientific. For this, Raphael conceived 4 main frescoes: the School of Athens, the Disputation of the Holy Sacrament, the Parnassus, and the Cardinal Virtues. Each fresco was a masterpiece in its own right, seamlessly integrating classical and Christian themes and ideals. The School of Athens, which remains one of Raphael's most celebrated works, is widely regarded as the embodiment of Renaissance humanism. In this monumental fresco, Raphael brings together the great minds of antiquity, including Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and Pythagoras, in a grand architectural setting inspired by the classical ruins that were being uncovered in Rome at the time. The composition is both harmonious and dynamic, as the figures engage in intellectual discourse, each depicted with a lifelike quality that reflects Raphael's mastery of the human form. The figures are not only idealized, but also imbued with personality, offering a visual representation of the Renaissance belief in the unity of knowledge. Raphael's use of perspective and his handling of space in the fresco are revolutionary, creating a sense of depth and realism that was unmatched by any other artist of the time. In the Disputation of the Holy Sacrament, Raphael blended the themes of theology and philosophy, illustrating the relationship between the divine and the earthly. The scene is dominated by a divine light that illuminates the Eucharist, with Christ and the Virgin Mary placed centrally in a heavenly space above the earthly congregation of theologians and philosophers. This composition captures both the complexity of Christian doctrine and the Renaissance interest in the balance between faith and reason. The fresco is both a reflection of the spiritual aspirations of the Church and a testament to Raphael's ability to merge the intellectual with the religious. While Raphael's theological and philosophical works were impressive, the stanza della Segnatura also contained a fresco that celebrated the poetic and artistic dimensions of the Renaissance. The Parnassus depicts the god Apollo surrounded by the Muses, as well as numerous poets from both the classical world and the contemporary Renaissance period. Here, Raphael's attention to detail and his deep understanding of human anatomy shine through. The figures are rendered with elegance, each one expressing the ideals of beauty and grace that defined the Renaissance. The fresco is also a tribute to the power of poetry, literature, and the creative process, highlighting the Renaissance belief that art and literature were central to human achievement. Raphael's work in the stanza della Segnatura demonstrated his remarkable ability to synthesize complex themes and ideas into visually compelling works. His mastery of perspective, composition, and the human figure allowed him to create scenes that were not only intellectually rich, but also visually captivating. The frescoes of a room became a visual embodiment of the Renaissance ideals of harmony, balance, and intellectual enlightenment. Raphael's ability to blend classical antiquity with Christian themes was not only a testament to his intellectual acumen, but also a reflection of the broader cultural climate of the time. While the stanza della Segnatura is perhaps the most famous of Raphael's Vatican commissions, his work in the subsequent rooms of the papal apartments continued to elevate his reputation. In the stanza Dell'Iro, he painted the expulsion of Heliodorus from the temple and the miracle of the Mass at Bolsena. These frescoes are marked by their dramatic use of light, movement, and emotion, showcasing Raphael's ability to convey narrative with intensity and clarity. In these works, Raphael moved away from the serene, idealized figures of earlier periods, opting instead for compositions that were more dynamic and emotionally charged, in keeping with the themes of divine intervention and the miraculous. Raphael's growing influence extended beyond the Vatican. His work became highly sought after, and he was commissioned to create altarpieces, portraits, and architectural designs for churches and aristocratic families across Italy. His fame grew, and he became the artist of choice for the most powerful figures in Europe. His role as the chief painter of the Vatican was a testament to his skill and the trust that Pope Julius II placed in him. In addition to his commissions, Raphael also found time to mentor and guide a group of apprentices and assistants, including many future masters of the Renaissance, such as Giulio Romano and Gianfrancesco Penni, ensuring that his artistic legacy would continue long after his untimely death. The frescoes Raphael created for the Vatican were not only artistic achievements. They were symbolic of the broader cultural and intellectual movements of the Renaissance. They embodied the union of faith and reason, the reverence for classical antiquity, and the intellectual curiosity that defined the age. His work in the Vatican, particularly the School of Athens, became an enduring symbol of the Renaissance's commitment to humanistic values and the pursuit of knowledge. Raphael's ability to integrate these themes into a cohesive visual language ensured his place as one of the great masters of the Renaissance. Raphael's work in the Vatican was a culmination of his lifelong dedication to the ideals of beauty, proportion, and harmony. His frescoes remain among the most admired works of art in the world, not only for their technical mastery, but also for the way they reflect the intellectual and spiritual aspirations of the Renaissance. In addition to his monumental frescoes and religious works, Raphael's skill as a portraitist played a significant role in shaping his legacy. While many of his masterpieces are located in grand public spaces, a series of intimate portraits also solidified his reputation as a master of capturing the human soul. Unlike other Renaissance artists who often lean towards idealized or allegorical depictions of their subjects, Raphael was able to render his sitters with a combination of grace, realism, and psychological depth. His portraits not only reflected the external appearance of his subjects, but also provided insight into their personalities, status, and emotional nuances. Raphael's ability to combine realism with a serene elegance was evident in the portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, one of his most famous portrait commissions. Castiglione was a renowned diplomat, writer, and philosopher, best known for his work The Book of the Courtier, which outlined the ideal qualities of a gentleman. In this portrait, Raphael captured Castiglione not only as a dignified and learned man, but also as a figure of grace and nobility. The painting's composition, with Castiglione seated in a relaxed pose, wearing an elegant yet modest black robe, reveals Raphael's talent for conveying both social status and personal character. The soft, yet vivid details, such as the gentle folds in Castiglione's clothing and the thoughtful expression in his eyes, imbue the portrait with a quiet nobility that speaks volumes about the subject's personality and intellect. The success of the portrait of Baldassare Castiglione was a turning point for Raphael, and it exemplified his ability to bring subjects to life in a way that few other artists of his time could. The composition of the portrait, with its delicate play of light and shadow, demonstrates his mastery of chiaroscuro and his talent for creating depth and volume in the human figure. His use of rich, yet subdued, colors contributed to the timeless, almost ethereal quality of the work. At the same time, the portrait's realism allowed the viewer to connect with Castiglione on a personal level, offering a glimpse into his character and the dignity he carried as a high-ranking courtier. It is no surprise that this portrait remains one of Raphael's most revered works. Raphael's ability to capture the essence of the individual in his portraits can also be seen in the portrait of Pope Julius II. As one of the most powerful and influential figures in Europe at the time, Pope Julius II was not only a patron of the arts, but also a warrior pope who led military campaigns. In this portrait, Raphael depicted Julius II as both a formidable leader and a man of great authority. The Pope is shown seated, his regal presence emphasized by his rich red and gold papal attire. The painting is both a reflection of Julius II's power and an intimate portrayal of his aging figure, suggesting a vulnerability beneath the Pope's commanding exterior. Raphael's subtle use of light and shadow around Julius's face, particularly around his furrowed brow and expressive eyes, imbues the portrait with a sense of gravitas and humanity. Unlike the serene elegance of his other portraits, the portrait of Pope Julius II captures a different, more complex side of the subject. Raphael, known for his delicacy and refinement, reveals a pope who is more than just a figurehead. He is a man of action, determination, and wisdom, yet also one who bears the signs of time and struggle. This portrait stands as a testament to Raphael's ability to balance the dualities of public persona and personal character, showing not only the power Julius II wielded, but also the humanity that lay beneath it. Another notable example of Raphael's portraiture is the portrait of a young woman, often thought to depict a member of the prominent Roman aristocracy. In this piece, Raphael presented a young woman in the prime of life, dressed in the fashionable attire of the time. The woman's pose is reserved yet confident, with her hand resting delicately on the arm of her chair. The soft yet vibrant palette used to depict her gown and the gentle modeling of her features give the portrait an air of elegance and refinement. But it is the subject's expression, quiet, poised, and introspective, that gives the viewer a sense of her inner life. The portrait's subtle psychological depth, combined with its fine attention to texture and detail, highlights Raphael's exceptional ability to capture both external beauty and internal character. Raphael's portraits often exhibited a certain idealism, yet his work did not shy away from portraying his subjects with remarkable psychological insight. The way he captured his sitter's expressions, whether contemplative, confident, or melancholic, demonstrated his acute awareness of human nature. One such portrait that reveals this is the portrait of Agnolo Doni, the husband of a Florentine patron for whom Raphael also painted a Madonna. In this portrait, Doni is depicted with a calm and dignified expression, his stance formal, yet his eyes suggest a man with both intellect and feeling. The detailed rendering of the subject's face, clothing, and surroundings speaks to Raphael's technical precision and his ability to create a powerful psychological connection with the viewer. The portrait of the lady with a unicorn is another of Raphael's works that speaks volumes about his mastery of portraiture. Unlike many artists of the period, Raphael avoided depicting his female subjects in the idealized or saintly manner typical of religious art. Instead, his portraits of women were imbued with a sense of realness and vitality, as seen in The Lady with a Unicorn. The sitter's graceful posture, coupled with the inclusion of a unicorn, which symbolized purity and beauty in Renaissance iconography, suggests an idealization of the subject, but also maintains an air of dignity and quiet mystery. The portrait is a fine example of how Raphael could elevate a seemingly simple subject into an elegant composition rich with symbolism. What truly set Raphael apart from his contemporaries in portraiture was his ability to paint not just the likeness of his subjects, but to convey something more profound about them. Through his subtle use of gesture, expression, and background elements, Raphael gave his portraits a psychological depth that allowed viewers to feel a connection with the subjects. Whether he was painting a member of the nobility, a scholar, or a pope, his works transcended mere representation, becoming windows into the lives and personalities of the people he depicted. Raphael's contributions to portraiture were not only important in the development of Renaissance art, but also played a significant role in the way individuals were perceived within society. In an age where portraiture was increasingly becoming a vehicle for the display of social status and intellectual achievement, Raphael's portraits became a means of asserting the subject's identity and worth. By giving his sitters a sense of dignity, grace, and emotional depth, Raphael captured the essence of Renaissance ideals and demonstrated the growing significance of the individual in art and society. While Raphael is often celebrated for his extraordinary skills as a painter, his influence extended beyond the realm of frescoes and portraits. One of the lesser-known aspects of his genius was his role as an architect. In fact, Raphael's contributions to Renaissance architecture were as profound as his work in painting. His architectural designs, much like his artistic compositions, reflected the Renaissance ideals of harmony, proportion, and balance. During his time in Rome, Raphael was appointed as the chief architect of St. Peter's Basilica, one of the most ambitious and significant architectural projects of the time. Though he did not live long enough to see the completion of the basilica, his designs and influence left a lasting mark on the development of the church and Renaissance architecture as a whole. Raphael's entry into architecture was not accidental. As an artist steeped in the study of classical antiquity, he had developed a deep understanding of the principles that governed ancient Roman architecture. The Renaissance's fascination with the revival of classical forms and the study of Vitruvius, the Roman architect, had laid the foundation for a new era of architectural design. Raphael, like his contemporaries, was influenced by these classical ideals, and his works in architecture reflected a balance between functionality and beauty, practicality and grandeur. His role as an architect was an extension of his overall artistic vision, in which he sought to create spaces that were not only visually stunning, but also resonated with intellectual and spiritual significance. One of Raphael's first architectural assignments in Rome came when Pope Julius II asked him to work on the design of the Chigi Chapel in the Church of Santa Maria del Popolo. This commission allowed Raphael to experiment with the integration of painting and architecture, a fusion that would become a hallmark of his later work. In this chapel, Raphael's designs incorporated elegant, harmonious proportions and intricate details that served to enhance the overall spiritual experience of the space. The chapel's vault, with its delicate ribbed design and intricate fresco decoration, demonstrated Raphael's ability to merge artistic beauty with architectural functionality. However, Raphael's most important architectural project was undoubtedly his involvement in the design of St. Peter's Basilica. In 1514, Raphael was appointed as the chief architect of the basilica following the death of Donato Bramante, the original architect. St. Peter's, as the most significant church in Christendom, was an extraordinary undertaking, and its design would set the standard for church architecture for centuries to come. Under Raphael's leadership, the project entered a new phase of development, characterized by his emphasis on classical symmetry and a clear, orderly layout that would define the Renaissance approach to ecclesiastical design. Raphael's vision for St. Peter's was rooted in his study of ancient Roman temples and basilicas, such as the Pantheon. He believed that architecture should reflect the grandeur and majesty of God's creation, and as such, his designs sought to inspire awe and reverence. The central plan of the basilica, which he helped to develop, was an expression of both spiritual and mathematical order. Raphael's understanding of the importance of proportion, derived from classical texts and his own artistic work, influenced his approach to the spatial organization of the basilica. His design placed a focus on a large central dome, intended to symbolize the heavenly realm and the divine presence within the church. While Raphael's involvement in the St. Peter's project was transformative, his work was also integrally connected to the contributions of other Renaissance architects, most notably Michelangelo, who succeeded him in overseeing the basilica's construction. Nonetheless, Raphael's role in the early design phase of the basilica helped to establish the foundation for its later development. He introduced a more harmonious and balanced approach to the basilica's design, combining elements of classical architecture with Renaissance ideals. His use of geometric clarity and careful consideration of the building's proportions ensured that the church would embody the spiritual aspirations of the time. Raphael's work in architecture extended beyond St. Peter's Basilica. He also contributed to the design of several other notable buildings in Rome, including the Palazzo Branconio dell'Aquila and the Palazzo Mattei. These projects allowed Raphael to explore new architectural forms and experiment with the integration of classical motifs in secular buildings. His use of colonnades, vaulted ceilings, and intricate facades demonstrated his skill at adapting classical elements for contemporary needs. In these secular commissions, Raphael's work was marked by a subtle elegance and balance, underscoring his ability to create spaces that were both functional and visually striking. In addition to his architectural projects, Raphael was instrumental in the planning of several urban spaces in Rome. As the city was undergoing significant transformations during the Renaissance, Raphael's input helped shape the overall aesthetic of the urban environment. His designs for the urban layout of certain public squares and streets reflected his belief that architecture should not only serve practical needs, but also enhance the collective experience of the city. The integration of open spaces, fountains, and harmonious building lines in his designs created a sense of order and beauty that transformed the urban landscape. Raphael's influence as an architect was not confined to the buildings he designed, but extended to his role as a teacher and mentor. Many of his students, including his assistant Giulio Romano, went on to become influential architects in their own right. Raphael's innovative approaches to classical architecture were passed down through his workshop and had a lasting impact on the development of Renaissance and Baroque architecture. His emphasis on proportion, symmetry, and the harmonious integration of art and architecture influenced generations of architects, ensuring that his architectural legacy lived on long after his death. Although Raphael's architectural work was interrupted by his untimely death in 1520, his contributions to the field are undeniable. His designs for St. Peter's Basilica, as well as his work on private commissions, helped shape the architectural language of the Renaissance. The clarity, balance, and grace that characterized his buildings were a natural extension of the artistic principles he had mastered as a painter. Through his work as an architect, Raphael was able to bring the ideals of Renaissance humanism into the realm of space and structure, blending form and function to create environments that reflected both the intellectual and spiritual aspirations of his time. Raphael's death at the age of just 37 in 1520 was a tragic loss to the world of art. Yet his relatively short life left an indelible mark on the course of art history. As one of the greatest painters of the Renaissance, Raphael's influence extended well beyond his time, shaping the trajectory of European art for centuries to come. His legacy, while rooted in the Renaissance, transcended the era, impacting later art movements, influencing artists such as Michelangelo, Titian, and even Baroque masters like Peter Paul Rubens. Through his mastery of composition, harmony, and realism, Raphael's art embodied the ideals of the Renaissance, setting a standard for excellence that would be emulated by generations of artists. The hallmark of Raphael's work was his ability to harmonize elements of classical antiquity with the evolving ideals of the Renaissance. His paintings, with their balanced compositions, clear sense of perspective, and naturalistic depictions of the human figure, became templates for many artists who followed him. Raphael's school of Athens, in particular, became an iconic symbol of Renaissance humanism, illustrating the fusion of philosophical thought and artistic achievement. His idealized representation of the great thinkers of antiquity showcased his deep understanding of classical principles, while simultaneously embodying the intellectual spirit of the Renaissance, which sought to revive and reinterpret the achievements of ancient Greece and Rome. One of the key features of Raphael's influence was his approach to composition. His works are known for their fluidity and the sense of unity between the various elements of a painting. Raphael's ability to bring order to his compositions, through a careful arrangement of figures, architecture, and space, set him apart from his contemporaries. Unlike some of his contemporaries, who often embraced a more fragmented or dynamic composition, Raphael emphasized clarity and balance. This style appealed to artists throughout the Renaissance and beyond, as it became a model for creating harmonious and cohesive works of art. His emphasis on geometric harmony, influenced by the classical principles of Vitruvius, continued to resonate in art theory and practice well into the Baroque period. Raphael's mastery of the human figure and his ability to imbue his subjects with a sense of grace and dignity also played a pivotal role in shaping the Renaissance. His understanding of anatomy was profound, and he was able to capture the natural beauty of the human form in a way that few other artists could. Unlike his contemporaries, who sometimes idealized or exaggerated the human body, Raphael's figures were not only aesthetically pleasing, but also believable and relatable. This humanism, his desire to portray the human form with naturalistic precision, became a fundamental element of Renaissance painting and had a lasting influence on later artists, especially those working in the High Renaissance and Baroque periods. In addition to his technical prowess, Raphael's skill in creating psychological depth within his subjects set him apart from many other artists of his time. His portraits, in particular, are noted for their ability to reveal the inner life of the subject. The portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, for example, conveys not just the physical likeness of the sitter, but his intellectual character as well. Raphael's ability to capture subtle emotional states, from the quiet introspection of Castiglione to the commanding presence of Pope Julius II, demonstrated his talent for merging realism with psychological insight. This aspect of his work was especially influential on portraiture in the Renaissance and beyond, paving the way for later developments in portrait painting, including the emotive expressions of Baroque art. Beyond his technical innovations, Raphael's intellectual and cultural contributions were crucial to the development of Renaissance art. As an active participant in the artistic and intellectual circles of his time, Raphael helped to shape the ideas and debates surrounding the role of art in society. His work as a painter and architect was not just a reflection of his individual talents, but also a reflection of the broader cultural shifts of the Renaissance. Raphael's integration of classical philosophy, Christian theology, and Renaissance humanism in his works contributed to the cultural synthesis that defined the period. As a result, his work became a model for artists who sought to express the ideals of the Renaissance through visual means. Raphael's influence was particularly felt in the field of religious art. During the Renaissance, the Church was one of the primary patrons of the arts, and much of the artwork produced during this time was religious in nature. Raphael's religious paintings, including the Sistine Madonna, the Transfiguration, and the Madonna of the Goldfinch, were widely admired for their serene beauty, technical brilliance, and emotional depth. These works embodied the Renaissance desire to reconcile faith with reason, presenting religious themes in a way that was both intellectually stimulating and emotionally moving. His ability to convey divine grace through the human figure was a defining characteristic of his religious paintings and became a standard for later religious art. Raphael's influence was not limited to the realm of religious painting. It extended to the development of mythological and historical art as well. His mythological scenes, such as the Triumph of Galatea, combined classical themes with Renaissance aesthetics, infusing the ancient world with a sense of the idealized beauty and harmony that defined the period. His historical paintings, such as the expulsion of Heliodorus from the temple, showcased his ability to bring narrative to life with dramatic tension, movement, and vivid emotion. Raphael's work in these genres helped to establish the foundation for future artists who would explore similar themes, particularly during the Baroque period, when artists like Caravaggio and Rubens would build upon the emotional intensity and dramatic realism that Raphael had introduced. Furthermore, Raphael's work had a profound impact on the development of perspective in painting. While many artists of the Renaissance, including Brunelleschi and Leonardo da Vinci, had explored the principles of linear perspective, it was Raphael who fully embraced the potential of perspective to create a sense of depth, space, and realism. His use of perspective in works like the School of Athens and the Disputation of the Holy Sacrament added an unparalleled sense of order and balance to his compositions. His ability to manipulate space, creating the illusion of depth while maintaining harmony between the figures, set a new standard for painters working in the High Renaissance. Raphael's influence extended far beyond the Renaissance, especially during the Baroque period. The elegance and grace of his work served as a model for Baroque artists who sought to blend dramatic emotion with classical refinement. His portraits, in particular, became a benchmark for portrait painters like Peter Paul Rubens, who admired Raphael's ability to convey both the exterior and the interior of his subjects. Raphael's mastery of color, light, and texture was also appreciated by later generations of artists, who often cited him as a source of inspiration. The legacy of Raphael, however, was not just technical or stylistic, it was also cultural. His works, whether religious or secular, reflected the intellectual currents of the Renaissance, including the humanist pursuit of knowledge, the revival of classical antiquity, and the synthesis of faith and reason. His art became a symbol of the Renaissance's triumph and a visual embodiment of its ideals. Even today, Raphael's legacy continues to shape the way we understand the Renaissance, its cultural values, and its profound impact on Western art. The legacy of Raphael extends far beyond his own paintings, architecture, and contributions to the Renaissance. One of the most significant aspects of his enduring influence is his impact on the education of future generations of artists. Raphael's workshop in Rome, often referred to as the Raphaelesque School, became a hub for artistic training, where many of the leading painters of the next generation honed their skills. Under his mentorship, the art of the Renaissance was not only preserved but refined and passed down, ensuring its survival and evolution long after his untimely death. Raphael's role as a teacher was crucial in shaping the direction of Renaissance art. He was more than just a practitioner of the arts. He was an intellectual figure who valued the exchange of ideas and knowledge. His workshop became a space of artistic experimentation and innovation, where apprentices and young artists learned the technical and philosophical aspects of painting. Among his students, the most notable were Giulio Romano, his closest assistant, and Perino del Vaga, who would go on to become influential artists in their own right. Raphael's ability to instill in his students the values of balance, proportion, and beauty is a testament to his greatness as both an artist and a teacher. The environment in Raphael's workshop was not unlike a modern-day studio or art school. Apprentices were trained in various aspects of painting, from preparing pigments and canvases to understanding the nuances of human anatomy and perspective. Raphael himself played an active role in the instruction of his students, often guiding them in their compositions and offering critical feedback. His emphasis on classical ideals was central to his teaching, and his students were encouraged to study the works of ancient Greek and Roman art, as well as the masterpieces of their Renaissance predecessors, including Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Raphael's approach to education was holistic, blending technical skills with intellectual development. He believed that an artist should not only possess the technical expertise to execute their vision, but also the intellectual capacity to understand the deeper philosophical and cultural underpinnings of their work. His teachings were rooted in the humanist ideals of the Renaissance, which emphasized the study of classical texts, mathematics, and the natural world. This well-rounded education ensured that his students were not just skilled painters, but also well-versed in the intellectual currents of their time. It was this intellectual foundation that set Raphael's workshop apart from others, establishing it as one of the most important artistic schools in Europe. One of Raphael's greatest pedagogical achievements was his ability to merge theory with practice. In his workshop, students were taught the classical principles of geometry and proportion, as well as the technical aspects of color and light. At the same time, they were encouraged to experiment with their own artistic vision. Raphael's guidance allowed each student to develop their own style, while still adhering to the core principles of Renaissance art. This balance between tradition and innovation became a defining feature of Raphael's teaching. And it is this blend of rigor and creativity that made his workshop so influential. In addition to his teaching, Raphael's written contributions also played a role in shaping the education of future artists. Though Raphael himself did not leave behind a formal treatise on art, his influence can be seen in the work of his students and in the writings of later artists who were inspired by his methods. For example, the artist and architect Andrea Palladio, who studied under Raphael's followers, was greatly influenced by Raphael's principles of symmetry and proportion. Similarly, the artist Giorgio Vasari, who wrote extensively about the lives of artists and his lives of the most excellent painters, sculptors, and architects, praised Raphael not only for his artistic skill, but also for his intellectual approach to art and education. Raphael's influence on art education was also felt beyond Italy. His work and teaching had a significant impact on the development of art schools across Europe. In France, for instance, Raphael's style was highly regarded by the French court, and many French artists sought to emulate his techniques. The royal patronage Raphael received in Rome helped to elevate his reputation beyond Italy, making him a central figure in European art. His work became a model for aspiring artists in various European courts, and his influence spread throughout the continent, particularly during the High Renaissance and the Baroque periods. Raphael's legacy in art education also contributed to the professionalization of the artist's role in society. Before the Renaissance, art was often considered a craft, with little regard for intellectual or philosophical engagement. However, Raphael's blending of intellectual rigor with technical skill helped elevate the status of the artist to that of a learned professional. The establishment of art academies, where students were trained in both technique and theory, can be traced back to Raphael's approach to education. His workshop was a precursor to these academies, and it played a key role in shaping the evolution of formal art education. One of the key elements of Raphael's approach to art education was his commitment to innovation. While he adhered to the classical ideals of proportion, harmony, and balance, he also encouraged his students to push the boundaries of these principles. He was not afraid to experiment with new techniques, such as the use of sfumato, which he borrowed from Leonardo da Vinci. He also developed new approaches to composition, light, and shadow that would have a lasting impact on the way artists approach these elements. Raphael's willingness to experiment, while still adhering to the core principles of the Renaissance, allowed him to remain at the forefront of artistic innovation. As a result of his profound influence on his students and the broader art community, Raphael's legacy in the world of art education is undeniable. His workshop set the standard for future generations of artists, and his teachings helped to shape the direction of Western art. Today, Raphael's impact can still be seen in the way art is taught and practiced around the world. The ideals of harmony, balance, and intellectual engagement that he championed continue to resonate in art education, and his influence is felt in the work of contemporary artists who strive to achieve the same sense of beauty and order that he brought to his own masterpieces. The impact of RAPHAEL SANZIO on the history of Western art transcends the centuries since his death in 1520. His works, widely revered for their beauty, balance, and grace, continue to be celebrated and studied around the world. As one of the three giants of the High Renaissance, alongside Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, Raphael's legacy is cemented not only in his contributions to art, architecture, and education, but also in how his works have come to symbolize the pinnacle of human artistic achievement. Unlike other artists whose influence is limited to a particular time or movement, Raphael's legacy is timeless. His art continues to captivate audiences, offering a reflection of Renaissance ideals that still resonate today. Following his untimely death, Raphael's reputation continued to grow, and his works were seen as the gold standard for what was considered the perfect fusion of technical skill and intellectual depth. Raphael's seamless integration of classical antiquity with Christian themes, His mastery of perspective and proportion, and his ability to breathe life into religious and historical figures ensured that his works would remain relevant for centuries to come. His style, marked by clarity and serenity, became the model for artists in subsequent generations, and his art influenced movements well beyond the Renaissance. In the centuries following Raphael's death, his name was revered across Europe. During the Baroque period, his influence was particularly pronounced, as artists like Peter Paul Rubens and Gian Lorenzo Bernini drew inspiration from his mastery of the human form and composition. In particular, the development of Baroque portraiture was deeply indebted to Raphael's techniques, which combined emotional depth with classical precision. His works, especially his portraits and religious paintings, continue to inspire artists seeking to achieve the same balance of naturalism and idealization that Raphael so effortlessly conveyed. One of the most enduring aspects of Raphael's legacy is his role as a symbol of the Renaissance's intellectual and artistic triumph. His art epitomized the Renaissance ideals of humanism, the belief that humanity's potential for greatness could be realized through art, science, and philosophy. Raphael's paintings and frescoes, such as the School of Athens, celebrated the wisdom of classical antiquity, embodying the period's emphasis on learning and the quest for knowledge. The serenity and harmony found in his works offered a visual representation of the Renaissance's ideals, creating a bridge between the ancient world and the Renaissance humanist movement. In this sense, Raphael's art became a model for future generations of artists who sought to capture both the beauty and the intellectual depth of the human experience. Moreover, Raphael's influence extended to the development of art as a profession. During the Renaissance, artists were often viewed as mere craftsmen, but Raphael's intellectual approach to his work helped elevate the status of the artist to that of a learned professional. His ability to synthesize classical principles with religious and humanist themes contributed to a new understanding of the artist's role as a creator, an intellectual, and a philosopher. Raphael was one of the first to shape the notion that art was not merely about creating beauty, but about conveying deeper meanings and exploring complex ideas. This shift in how art was perceived set the stage for the modern understanding of the artist as an autonomous creative force, whose works could reflect societal values, intellectual pursuits, and emotional depth. Raphael's enduring influence is also evident in the way his works are revered today in art institutions across the globe. Major museums and galleries, including the Vatican Museums, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and the National Gallery in London, house some of his most famous works. These masterpieces, including the Sistine Madonna, the Transfiguration, and the Madonna of the Meadow, continue to draw crowds and inspire both art lovers and scholars. Raphael's ability to combine technical precision with a profound understanding of human emotion ensures that his works remain as powerful and relevant today as they were during the Renaissance. In addition to his individual works, Raphael's influence is also seen in the evolution of art collections and exhibitions. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, aristocratic patrons and monarchs sought to collect works by Raphael, cementing his status as one of the most important artists in history. His paintings became prized possessions, regarded as cultural treasures. Even today, Raphael's influence can be seen in the way art is collected, exhibited, and studied. His works are not just pieces of art. They are representations of a cultural movement, a time of intellectual awakening, and a moment when humanity's relationship to the divine and the natural world was being redefined through artistic expression. However, the lasting power of Raphael's art also lies in its universal appeal. His ability to convey emotion, beauty, and intellectual depth resonates with people from all walks of life, regardless of time or place. The serene expressions of his Madonnas, the lively interactions of the figures in the School of Athens, and the tender moments captured in his portraits continue to speak to viewers on an emotional level. Raphael's art transcends historical context, offering a timeless meditation on the human condition, the nature of beauty, and the pursuit of knowledge. In a world that is constantly changing, his works provide a sense of continuity, reminding us of the enduring power of art to bridge the gap between the past and the present. Raphael's influence is also embedded in the way that art continues to be taught and understood. His impact on the education of future generations of artists, particularly through his workshop, has shaped the way art schools and institutions operate to this day. His principles of proportion, harmony, and idealization remain core components of art curricula worldwide. Additionally, Raphael's innovative techniques, such as his use of color, light, and perspective, continue to be studied by aspiring artists who look to his work as a model for achieving technical excellence. In this sense, Raphael's art not only shapes the history of Western art, but also informs the future of artistic practice. In popular culture, Raphael's influence has also remained steadfast. His works continue to inspire a wide array of media, from film and literature to modern visual art and design. His ability to create timeless compositions that blend idealized beauty with intellectual engagement has made his works a source of inspiration for countless artists and creators across various fields. Raphael's images have become ingrained in the collective cultural consciousness, and references to his style and themes can be found in everything from modern advertising to film depictions of Renaissance Italy. In conclusion, Raphael's immortalization as one of the greatest artists in history is a testament to his profound impact on the world of art. His contributions to painting, architecture, and education have left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, shaping the trajectory of Western art for centuries. Raphael's ability to blend beauty, intellectual depth, and technical skill set a standard for future generations of artists, ensuring his place in the pantheon of artistic legends. His legacy continues to live on in the countless works of art he produced, the artists he mentored, and the profound influence he had on the course of art history. As long as art exists, Raphael's name will remain synonymous with the very essence of the Renaissance, an era that celebrated the potential of humanity through the transformative power of art.